You're listening to the VBMA Podcast.
Today's episode is brought to you by three of our loyal sponsors, AVMA Family, Nationwide, and Purina. The AVMA is your association. Whether you're looking for professional resources or no-cost insurance options for SAVMA members, the AVMA family of AVMA and AVMA Trust have your back. For almost 20 years, Nationwide has been honored to stand as a founding sponsor of the VBMA. Their goal is to help provide relevant educational content to empower aspiring veterinarians to take a holistic approach to pet healthcare and meet pet families where they are. Purina Pro Plan Veterinary Diets and Supplements is a proud partner of veterinary professionals. Visit purinaforprofessionals.com. That's purinaforprofessionals.com to learn more. We are very appreciative of these sponsors and express a sincere thank you for their continued support. Okay, welcome back to another iteration of the VBMA podcast. The title of today's episode is the VBMA's Honors Portfolio, Tales of Veterinary Success. And just for you wordplay enthusiasts, that's Tales, T-A-I-L-S. Today, we're talking about the Honors Portfolio, and we have a couple of exciting guests, Joe and Kyleigh, VBMA alumni and former National Board members. We'll let them introduce themselves here in a second. I'm your host today. I'm Mitch. I'm the 2023 National Business Certificate Program Director. I'm a third-year vet student at Colorado State University. And like I just mentioned, we have Joe and Kyleigh here today, so we'll give them both a few minutes to introduce themselves. Thank you for coming today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having us. Kyleigh, you want to go ahead and intro yourself first?
Sure. Yeah, I can go first. My name is Kyleigh. Like Mitch said, I am a previous board member of the National Board. I was the 2022 Business Certificate Director. And I'm sorry, my cat is being so noisy. I'm sorry. 1 second.
No worries. I can go ahead and intro myself while Kyleigh goes and rescues her cat from whatever danger it got itself into. But yeah, my name is Joe. It was the 2022 National Vice President. So I worked alongside Kyleigh for that year. I also graduated in 2023 from the University of Wisconsin and have been working since then as a general practitioner in Prior Lake, Minnesota, which is a suburb of Minneapolis.
It wouldn't be a veterinary podcast if there wasn't an animal involved. So I think that's a great little nugget of content for our listeners. And Kyleigh, is there anything else you'd like to add about yourself?
Yes, I'm so sorry. I graduated from Ohio State University in 2023.
The Ohio State University, kind of.
From the Ohio State University, of course. I try not to speak it too loudly in my apartment because I'm currently a pathology resident at Michigan State, and Ohio is a bad word around here. But yes, that's what I'm doing right now.
Very excited. Thank you so much for the two of you being here. We really appreciate your time. Before we get into the meat and potatoes that is the Honors Portfolio, just a fun little icebreaker question. I'm sure, as you know, at this point, I like to ask weird questions. So today we're going to keep it more veterinary medicine themed. And the question is, what's your favorite anatomical structure?
Man, that is a good question. Favorite anatomical structure? I think I'm gonna go ahead and say the knee, the stifle, depending on, I think it's a relatively important joint. I feel like it gets quite a bit of disease associated with it, but when it comes down to it, it's relatively simple. There's really not that much going on there, just, a few ligaments that hold everything together. And I like that it is applicable as a sports fan. I feel like there's a lot of sports injuries in human medicine, and it is similar enough that it gives me a little extra knowledge over my friends as we're watching sports and we see knee injuries. So I think, and my wife is an orthopedic PA too, so she operates on knees all day long. So it's probably the most discussed anatomical structure in the Thurston household as well. So I think I'm going to go with the knee.
Phenomenal answer.
I am going to go with the heart. My favorite organ is the heart, mostly because when I am doing necropsies as a pathologist, that is my favorite organ to dissect. There's a very systematic way that you do it, and it's been torturing vet students since whenever we started doing necropsies. And so, yeah, I really like the heart.
I have to say, Joe did steal my answer. My number one on the podium is, in fact, the stifle for basically everything he said. Is primarily the correlation between sports and vet med. But if I had to go with number two on the podium, I think I would I would probably go with the liver. It's just a bell cow, a workhorse of an organ, right? It does so many things, like truly couldn't live without it. So I think that's a good podium of anatomical structures. And now we can, really get into what the listeners are here for. And that's talking about the honors portfolio. Both of you are honors portfolio grads, and just want to hear your perspective on it and how it has influenced and contributed to your career. Congratulations to the two of you as well, both new doctors. That's very exciting. But first question, why did the two of you complete the honors portfolio?
Yeah, so I kind of had a bit of a story I think that goes with this one. For me, I remember first year of vet school, right, sitting in like room 2360 at the University of Wisconsin. I was thinking, like, when it was getting intro to me, okay, here's what the honors portfolio is. And we had a doctor that talked a lot about finding your niche in veterinary medicine and how important it was to have like more like unique marketable things. But this was back in 2019, which seems like forever ago at this point, but it was very different space to what we're in now in terms of what the job market looks like and what vet med looks like in general, right? There was a little mini pandemic in between then. I don't know if you guys heard about that or noticed that affecting your lives at all. But then as I was like, okay, cool, this is something that'll set me apart, something to have on my resume as a resume builder. But by the time third year rolled around and I was actually going to complete it, resume builders with air quotes around it didn't matter as much for getting a job, right? If you had a DVM degree and a pulse, kind of reevaluate the decision to do the honors portfolio. And what kind of on second look, what struck me as, hey, this is a good reason to complete this was its skills or its strengths as a like interview tool. And that kind of goes both ways, right? Because now that there's a million jobs out there for everyone, interviews aren't just about me trying to sell myself. I have a little more power in the interview, right? It's about me interviewing the clinic as well. So I think seeing that the honors portfolio had lots of good questions for me to sit down and make sure I was prepared for interviews, make sure I knew exactly what kind of questions I was expecting to ask, but also it made me think, okay, what kind of practice do I like? What questions should I be asking to interview a practice to make sure I can find my dream job, so to speak? Because finding a job was easy. That was no problem. But making sure I was finding like the best fit for me was the main reason I wanted to complete the honors portfolio.
And I think you brought up an important highlight of the honors portfolio that I think lots of us as vet students struggle in finding our confidence and knowing the value that we can contribute to a practice, right? And it's not just about finding a job, but finding a career, right? And going through the honors portfolio gives you an opportunity to think about that ahead of time and allow you to build some of that confidence so that when you're looking for a job, you're not just going to settle for the first thing. Because as you mentioned, veterinarians are a hot commodity these days. And because of that, you don't have to settle for the first job that gets thrown your way.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially in the world of corporate medicine, there's lots of recruiters out there. It's very easy to find someone that'll hook you up with 4 or 5 jobs or clinics to go look at. And, you get job offers probably from most of those. So it's very easy to be like, do almost passive job searching, where you're just kind of along for the ride and you pick whichever clinic felt the nicest to you that day or whatever. So I think that I really was able to use it as a tool for an active job search, and something that I felt gave me, at least, especially now a few months in, I love my job. And I know that it was in part due to the honors portfolio helping me reach out for that more active search and making sure that I could ask questions that got me the answers I wanted. So afterwards, I could go back and evaluate the practices against each other in a little more apples to apples way, because I'd been doing a good job asking questions and stuff like that.
The reason that I did the honors portfolio is pretty similar to Joe's story. I had a really strong background in business. I studied business in part in my undergrad degree. While I am a pathologist, I don't want to own a practice. I am really interested in being an effective leader as a pathologist. And I think that this is a tangent off of that, but for our listeners, you don't have to want to own a practice or be in a leadership position to complete the honors portfolio. That was the case for me. I thought it was really valuable to learn some of these skills that maybe weren't going to directly correlate to my specific career path. Looking at profit and loss statements is something a pathologist really doesn't usually do. But, having the skill set of, I have this business related problem, how do I find the solution to it, is something that is applicable across the board. And it's applicable in pathology and it's applicable in maybe some of those non-clinic disciplines, as well as people who want to go out into practice. I think that the motivation for me behind doing the honors portfolio is to gain some very concrete skills that are directly from the honors portfolio, right? Learn how to manage my loans, learn how to have a budget, learn how to be an effective team leader and a team player and things like that. Those are direct things that I wanted to learn how to do better. But I think that some of the secondary things that happen, just looking at these complex problems that are in the honors portfolio that we aren't really confronted with in veterinary school, and thinking, how do I as a leader accomplish this problem that is faced before me? And I think that's really valuable to everybody, because whether you work in a clinic, whether you are in a pathology lab, whether you're out in USDA or whatever, you're going to have people who you are in charge of, and you need to know how to effectively manage them. You may be in charge of money. You need to know how to effectively manage that. Something that pathologists really talk about is our price increases, right? We're going through a price increase in January, and we are very involved as pathologists in making that assessment. So I think no matter what you go into, you can benefit from the honors portfolio, and it can help you get a taste of what it's like to be on the business side of things, which I feel like we don't get as have in veterinary school.
And you brought up two really good points that really capture some of the value of the honors portfolio. One, that's right, that it's the skills that you learn and build through VBMA and through the honors portfolio are not specific to one career path, right? It's very much so valuable to whatever you want to do and whatever you will be doing as a veterinarian. And although you didn't say this explicitly, it reminded me of another cool thing about the honors portfolio, and that your portfolio is graded by industry or career professional that is aligned with what you're interested in, right? And so that's a really awesome networking opportunity to get some, structured feedback, right? Like your portfolio grader will get an insight to kind of what you want to do and where your head's at this point in your career. And they can provide some really awesome guided feedback to help you achieve those goals as well. So thank you for sharing on that front. Going to shift gears a little bit here. We get a lot of questions about, when do I start working on the honors portfolio? How do I best complete it? Can I do it while I'm still earning BCP credit and stuff like that? So can the two of you just share how you went about completing the honors portfolio? Because it's a little intimidating at face value, but let's, reassure our listeners a little bit that it's totally doable and worthwhile while being a vet student.
Yeah. So I went ahead and started working on my honors portfolio right after that meeting where it got introduced to me. And what I did was I went on, checked out the things I had to do. And one of them was add a professional email address. So I added my normal email address, and then it gives, okay, cool, you're like 2% of the way done or whatever. And that's where then it stayed for 2 years. But that's not 100% true, I guess. I think one thing that helped me my third year of vet school, as I was starting to work on a little heavier, was that over the previous 2 years is that I kept track of what we needed to have done in the honors portfolio. So that way, when things that I was like doing for other classes or other meetings came up that were at least related to the honors portfolio, I would at least make mental note of it and save that document in a spot I could find it again later. Or I remember we had, I think it was like a nationwide revenue exercise or something like that, where we had, and as part of the exercise, we had to complete a budget. And I knew that for the honors portfolio, we also needed to have a budget, or like a budget was part of it at the time. So I just took screenshots of that exercise that I did with the budget and just uploaded them to the honors portfolio. So kind of, killing two birds with one stone in that regard. So by the time third year rolled around, I at least had done a few of the things, just more passively than anything else. And then third year, I think over winter break, sat down and over a couple chunks, 2-3 hours at a time, and filled out some of the bigger questions, because that's how my mind worked, where it's just easier for me once I got kind of rolling on something in that business mode. Because Kyleigh made a good point, is thinking about things from a little different perspective than we're used to in vet med. So once I was able to shift my brain, knock out a few of the questions at once and, upload them at that time. So it didn't really take me too terribly long. And I don't think I had all of the credits yet at that point. I think I was, 1 or 2 meetings short still, but I knew that over the rest of my third year, I was going to be getting them. Went ahead and was able to get all of those done in a couple of days over winter break, and not like full days by any means.
I think you I highlighted a good nugget that I want to make sure that we capture, and that we're a very pro work smarter, not harder program here at the VBMA, right? Like you mentioned, I already did this budgeting exercise. I'm going to use it again, right? The work you do on the honors portfolio doesn't have to be entirely novel or original for the sake of the honors portfolio. If you've already done some sort of work on that, right? Maybe if it's a couple years old, you brush it up and you update it with what you've learned in the last couple years. But definitely reusing your work is totally cool with us. So we don't want you working any harder than you have to.
Absolutely. Yeah. Cannot second that opinion enough. Work smarter, not harder.
I also started working on the honors portfolio my first semester of veterinary school. So first semester, first year, and you can really start working on it whenever. That's one thing that's really great about the honors portfolio. There's a lot of aspects that are customizable to your career path or your time that you have to put towards it. So I started working on it my first year before I even got my standard certificate. So you can be working on it your entire time in vet school. You can have however many credits. If you finish it your first semester of vet school, I finished mine during my second year, but I didn't have enough credits yet. So I just kept attending lectures. And once I hit the end of what it was required credit wise, I also got the honors portfolio. So you can work on it whenever, you can complete it whenever, and start working on that process at any time during vet school. The credits are kind of another thing that's separate, right? Like you have to have the 32 credits to get the honors portfolio, but you can do the credits in the honors portfolio asynchronously, for lack of a better word. You can do them independently.
Very cool. And I think the take home is at this point is that if you're thinking about doing it, you should go ahead and get started on it. Just do it. And if you're not thinking about doing it, hopefully at this point, you're thinking about doing it a little bit. But just to really hit this point home on the honors portfolio, please share something that you got out of post completing, post passing the honors portfolio, getting that cool certificate with the gold border and everything. What's some sort of impact it's made on your school experience, your career after completing the portfolio?
Yeah. And I kind of touched on it a bit as to like why I completed it, but I think I credit the job offer that I got to, in large part, to the honors portfolio. One of the interview questions I got asked by the job I currently have was, about my different strengths and how I can utilize those. And I think that was a question I filled out on the honors portfolio. And then I had some kind of follow-up questions that I think got good insights. And I think my boss, appreciated that I had valuable questions that weren't just really surface level stuff. So she could see that, oh yeah, like he's interested in the business and engaged in how the practice runs and stuff like that. So I think kind of those, one, setting yourself apart in interviews a little bit, even though, like I said, now that's not as needed as much to get the job, but it still certainly helps. I think the review was also really nice, being able to have kind of someone look at it. And I mean, I think I had very minimal revisions required or anything like that, but just confidence too that, okay, yes, an industry professional has looked at my resume and they think it's good. They've looked at the questions I'm going to ask for interviews and they think it's good. They look at, a few other, like my budget and just other stuff outside of vet med, and they think that's good. So it gave me a lot of confidence that I was at least headed in the right direction and set up for success post vet school.
Love to hear that. And again, we're hearing the theme of confidence, right? This experience helps you recognize how valuable you are to this community. And that's an important thing for the students and the baby vets to realize early on in their career.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that review was one of the biggest takeaways for me as well. I'm in a little bit smaller specialty. I'm in pathology, and I actually did have a pathologist who reviewed my material, which was super helpful to be like, oh, this is, something that you might see with somebody who's going into clinical medicine. But in pathology, we do it a little bit differently. And I found that super valuable. I'm also a reviewer now. So if any other pathologists are out there, there's a couple of us that are reviewing. But I found that really valuable because having somebody who is in my field review it and give me those nuances was really helpful. And then another thing that I found really valuable was just the initial exposure to business as a veterinarian. I think I was talking today, some of my work colleagues, about the need for very strong veterinary leadership in like the new generation coming out. Because there's a lot of veterinarians who are retiring. There's a lot of people who are leaving their positions of leadership and authority, and it will be us that has to take that on. And so I think getting that initial exposure to be like, okay, this is definitely attainable if I want to go into a leadership position within whatever discipline I'm in. I think just like you were saying, it helps to give that confidence and be like, this is something that is attainable. It's something you're gonna have to learn. Right. The honors portfolio isn't the end all be all of like the learning of the, veterinary business management, but it helps to incite kind of the curiosity and confidence going forward.
And the VBMA this is not at all the pinnacle of your education or anything, right? Like that, right? We want this to be the launch pad as you go out into your career. So as Kyleigh mentioned, hopefully by completing the honors portfolio, it's a little taste. It picks a curiosity. It gets you interested and excited. But thank you so much for your thoughts on the honors portfolio as a whole. As we come to a close here, I just want to open the floor up for the two of you. Any final thoughts, any soapboxes you want to get on for a couple minutes, whatever's on your mind, whether it's VBMA, honors portfolio, vet med related, whatever it may be. You are two very young, rising superstars in the field. So we want whatever pearls of wisdom you can share with us as we come to a close here.
Yeah, thank you much. Appreciate that nice little bump. Rising superstars. I might need to put that on my LinkedIn profile, that someone's called me that. So appreciate that. But yeah, I mean, I think one of my main soapboxes talking with current vet students now is, and I've already touched on this several times, is make sure you're an active interviewee as you're going out in your job search. Especially, I mean, I'm a small animal general practice, so that encompasses a large portion of the population, but I think it applies to any job in vet med now, making sure you know what you want and you're actively going out and searching for it. And sometimes knowing what you want is the hardest part, right? So taking some time to self-reflect on what environments you work well in. I had to do externships at several different size small animal general practice because I didn't know if I liked working in a 2-doctor practice or in a 14-doctor practice. So being able to know that about myself before I started interviewing was really helpful because I think that sets you up for success later. The other kind of soapboxes in this applies in vet school, in 4th year especially, or your clinical year, but also now as a new vet, is being able to and comfortable with mistakes happening, right? It's not to say you should be complacent if you mess up, understanding that, you're going to be wrong sometimes, especially in your clinical year. I got very comfortable being wrong pretty quick in my 4th year of vet school. And that's because that's where the learning happens, right? You just have to, at least by externally processing, you're able to allow those clinicians to give you a little more feedback as to, okay, yeah, you were down the right path here, but here's kind of where your thinking went wrong. And then now and transitioning out into practice, and cases aren't going to go right every time, even if you do the medicine perfectly. So understanding that mistakes happen, but being able to be flexible, take them in stride and learn, you're like, okay, yeah, I can learn something from that, or, being able to own it with the owner and during the communication process and stuff like that. It is really important to, one, good clinical outcomes, success in your profession and all that stuff, but also from I feel like a more mental health standpoint as well, where you're giving yourself some grace to understand that, you'll mess up sometimes and things won't go perfectly, and that's okay. And you'll learn from it and you'll move on. And that's a little more, I feel like, a positive outlook and something that is a little more sustainable long-term. Because if you're going to strive for perfection as a clinician, you're never going to quite hit that. No one ever does. So that's kind of my other little soapbox as a new grad veterinarian out in the field.
Thank you so much for sharing and just, bringing home our sports fandom. You reminded me of a Michael Jordan quote, right? I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've almost lost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed. I failed over and over again in my life, right? And he's regarded as the greatest basketball player of all time. Sorry to any LeBron fans that may be listening. That's just how it is, right? But that's the point, right? Like, even the people who are renowned as the greatest of all time fail over and over again. And as you said, that's where the magic happens. So couldn't echo
Absolutely.
that more. Like, don't be afraid to fail.
I have 2 little soapboxes that I always love to give on when I'm talking to VBMA students. One, VBMA is for everybody. You all are going to be leaders, whether or not you are in a formal capacity as a leader or whether or not you are working as a doctor with technicians. You are a leader, and Veterinary Business Management Association is helping you become the best leader that you can be. That is my soapbox that I love to get on. For VBMA, I say that as a pathologist, right? As somebody who's not ever going to own a practice. VBMA is for me and it's for everybody else. My second soapbox that I want to get on for all of our up and rising students who are going to graduate and come into this field you are so needed in our field, and you are agents for positive change, and we need that in our field. So I hope that you guys continue with vet school. I know it's tough, but get through it and go out and be great doctors and be great leaders.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So before we transition to the official outro, Joe, I just wanted to let you know that Emily couldn't make it on as a co-host this evening, but she does say hi indeed. And then as we come to a close here, we'd just like to invite all of you to follow us on our Instagram at the VBMA. We got 3 other podcasts that released this year. We have Conflict, When and How with Cindy Courtney, Anything is Possible with Dr. Brandy Douillat, and Student Debt, The Ins and Outs with Dr. Rebecca Mears. So we encourage you to check out those podcasts as well. And thank you all for listening. We will see you next time.